Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Bennett Tchaikovsky, also known as the accounting professor, and we're going to talk today about Roku and Silicon Valley Bank. Roku's cash and cash equivalent disclosures, some of the potential causes for the Silicon Valley Bank failure, and then future disclosure opportunities for the Securities and Exchange Commission, meaning that what are the different things that the SEC could do to beef things up. And I'm making this presentation today as of March 14th, 2023. This is a very evolving story, so anything I say, go check it out on your own. Okay, let's go ahead and talk. So my disclaimer and copyright notice, this presentation is for educational purposes only and is based on SEC filings. Nothing in this presentation constitutes legal and or accounting advice whatsoever. The statements and opinions shared in this presentation are those of the author only and not the author's employers or other affiliated organizations, including Irvine Valley College, the South Orange County Community College District, and California State University at Fullerton. This presentation is copyright 2023 by Bennett Tchaikovsky, the author. Any distribution without the express permission of the author is strictly prohibited. Okay. When I teach lower division financial accounting and intermediate financial accounting, I typically breeze through cash. Right now, the very first time I started teaching financial accounting, I kind of skipped over bank reconciliations, but what ended up happening is that I had a former student come back to me and said, "Hey, Bennett, you got to talk about bank recs." And so I said, sure. And I'm always looking to improve my teaching. Now, what we're going to do here today is we're going to talk about cash and cash equivalents and what does that mean, especially with relation to Roku. Okay, so when I go to a balance sheet, and I'll be posting the link for this over here. But when I go to Roku, okay, and I have a lot of other videos about how to access these on your own. But if I go over here and take a look at the financial statements, what you're going to notice is right over here, Roku, as of December 31st, had cash and cash equivalents of 1.9 billion. Okay, so these are in thousands. So this is $1 billion, almost $2 billion. So what exactly does a cash equivalent mean? Okay, so a cash equivalent is what they call a highly liquid investment purchased with an original maturity of 3 months or less at the date of purchase. And that's really what's considered to be a cash equivalent. So let's go ahead and kind of take a look basically at Roku. And the one thing I want to applaud Roku for is that if you have bad news and you are a publicly traded company, you need to let the world know immediately. And as a publicly traded company, how do companies, if it's after your annual report, how do we go through and disclose different items? Essentially, right over here on March 10th, we went through over here and talked about that we were aware of Silicon Valley Bank. So I want to applaud Roku, right? I'm kind of actually a Roku fan. I do like their stuff. I have like their soundbar at home, which is actually a pretty cool device, but hopefully they'll stay in business, right? I'm just getting around. So over here, Roku is aware that Silicon Valley Bank was closed today by the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. Didn't know that one existed, which appointed the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation as its receiver. So according to the FDIC, all insured depositors of SVP will have full access to their insured deposits. Now, when they made this announcement, the original announcement that came out by the Fed was saying we're only going to cover 250 grand. That has since changed since this disclosure. Now, here's the important part. The company has total cash and cash equivalents of approximately 1.9 billion. Now, and we'll see where they kind of said this, and approximately 487 million is held at Silicon Valley Bank, which is approximately 6% of the company's cash and cash equivalents as of March 10th, 2023. So right over here, as we go ahead and look, and we also see this over here, notwithstanding the closure, the company continues to believe that its existing cash and cash equivalents balance and cash from operations will be sufficient to meet its working capital expenditures and requirements for the next 12 months and beyond. So this was really a kind of a statement of reassurance that, hey, we lost some of our money potentially, which is now not the case. And so therefore, we're going through and making this disclosure. When I go to Roku now, what's really interesting is when, well, at least it's interesting to me, is when we look at a financial statement. Okay, so we have the financials right over here, got the balance sheet, the income statement, cash flows, owner's equity. So when we come over here, though, what we're going to see is information about certain account balances, and this is really important. When we look at cash and cash equivalents, this is for Roku, is that it considers all highly liquid investments with an original maturity of 3 months or less at the date of purchase to be cash equivalents. So it's not only cash, but it's also if I have a short-term CD that's going to be maturing in the next 90 days, that is what is also considered to be a cash equivalent. Now, here's the kicker. They disclosed as of December 31st that 2 financial institutions managed 26% and 21% of their cash equivalents as of December 31st, 2022. We now know that one of those institutions was in fact Silicon Valley Bank. So just kind of picture this right over here when you look at this. Now, over here, and by the way, the auditors of Roku, and if I ever want to find out who the auditors are, there's many ways to go through and find that out. But the best way to go through, and I misstated this today in class, it's actually Deloitte. Okay, so Deloitte actually issued Roku's audited financial report. So I want you to look at here, got the cash and cash equivalents for Roku. Okay, so, but now I want you to look at Robinhood. Okay, and this trades under their ticker symbol is Hood. Now, what you notice really differently about this is that when they talk about cash equivalents, and this is, I think, the language that Roku, I'm going to tell you right now, I think everybody's going to change their language, is that what it was missing was we maintain cash, and this is from Robinhood, we maintain cash in bank accounts at financial institutions that exceed federally insured limits. We also maintain cash and money market funds, which are not FDIC insured. Now, it was one thing when I was going through Roku, and I could not go through and find it as part of the cash and cash equivalents disclosure. So again, when you're looking at it here, and I'm looking at this in terms of my significant accounting policies as it relates to cash, I believe that Robinhood in this instance is doing a little bit of a better job in terms of, disclosing that they have amounts that exceed the federal depository limits. So the other thing that I also want to kind of talk to you about today is that when you saw the 8K that was issued by Roku, when you look at this over here, we believe that our cash and cash equivalents balances and cash flow will be sufficient to meet our working capital expenditures, and material cash requirements. When I look at this right over here, what's important about that language is in my 10K, and I believe it's also in the quarterly reports, I have to go through and make a disclosure. And this is what is very, very important. I have to say that, hey guys, hey everybody, we have enough money to last us at least the next 12 months and beyond. It's not Buzz Lightyear where it says infinity and beyond. It's just the next 12 months and beyond. And what really very important, basically, we believe that our existing cash and cash equivalents balance and cash flow from operations will be sufficient to meet our working capital expenditures, and material cash requirements from known contractual obligations for the next 12 months and beyond. So that is a very, very important terms of disclosure, because why is cash so important to publicly traded companies? If we don't have cash to basically fund our next 12 months of operations, what may end up happening to us is that the auditor that is going through and looking at us, they may give us something called a going concern opinion, meaning that the financial statements look okay, but they may not last the year. So that's why when you go through and look at this, it's really, really important that under liquidity and capital resources, will this company have enough cash to last for the upcoming year? So when we look at Roku, what is going to actually kind of happen going forward? Well, I can tell you right now, will Roku have count or basically have something where it goes through and talks about something like Robinhood, where basically we have cash and accounts that exceed federally insured limits? The answer is absolutely yes. And I'll talk a little bit more about what more than likely Roku and a lot of other companies are probably considering right now. So what caused Silicon Valley's bank failure? Was it deregulation? And you've already seen Senator Warren coming out and talking about this, but let's talk about what happened in the 2010 financial crisis. So after Lehman, after a lot of other banks that went belly up, they put in some tests to basically make sure that a bank would essentially, if something went bad, that there would be something there to basically make sure that the banks were constantly regulating themselves and basically putting them through tests that would obviously be reviewed by the FDIC or it's basically its assignees. Now, originally, back in 2010, when the Dodd Frank bill was passed, banks had any bank that with 50 billion in assets or greater had to go through and put itself through a bank stress test or a simulation or analysis conducted to analyze how a bank will be impacted under adverse market conditions. And this was for banks at 2010, it was 50 billion or more in assets. A living will for a bank denotes a contingency plan. So this is the second part. A living will for a bank denotes that a contingency plan is on the shelf in the case that the entity becomes insolvent and needs to be closed, sold, or broken up. Now, as you can imagine, in 2010, banks with $50 billion in assets or more, this was stressful, right? You have to conduct a stress test. That's going to be stressful. I have to write a living will. That's also stressful. So what ended up happening was, and again, I found this on the internet, so it must be true. Silicon Valley Bank had 200 billion in assets, and they were kind of saying, hey, I've got more than 50 billion. These tests are very stressful. So I'm going to pay a lobbyist 500 grand to get the regulations through to raise the limit from 50 billion to 250 billion. So what ended up happening is because Silicon Valley Bank fell below the threshold right over here as a bank, basically we fell below. So I no longer have to conduct these tests. Now, if Silicon Valley Bank had conducted these stress tests, what would have happened? The answer is, I don't know, right? Why did KPMG, who is the auditor of Silicon Valley Bank, not go through and do this? I don't know. Am I playing Monday morning quarterback, meaning I'm second guessing? Yeah, of course I am. But again, this is something that when you look at what they're talking about, that the deregulation in 2018, look, I'm a huge mega fan, which is Make Accounting Great Again, very apolitical. I don't really kind of talk politics on this channel, but as a result of the deregulation, this could have caused this to kind of go haywire. So when we look at this, and again, I'm going to go through and put all this stuff in moving forward. Now, here's the interesting part, is that also in financial statements, this is also really important to kind of go through and look at. When I'm looking at a set of financial statements, this is a great way to really learn about a company. You're going to learn about the business, the risk factors, legal proceeding, mine safety disclosures. Now, that's just something in there for if you're working mines, but it's all companies have to show it. Right over here, the market for the registrant's common equity, stockholder matters, MD&A. So as we look here over here, the risk factors is really what's telling us about what's going on with the company. Now, do I need to disclose for the company? Do I have to go over all crazy contingencies? Do I have to say a hypersonic missile is headed towards San Jose from Russia? Probably not. That doesn't really sound like something that we would want to go through and write this. But if I had operations that were in the Ukraine, that might be a risk factor, being right in a war zone. So again, when you see this part over here, the company will go through and talk about the risk factors that affect their industry. Now, playing Monday morning quarterback, what are all companies going to go through and do now? They're going to come out and say, we have money at a bank that exceeds the federally insured limits. So again, it's one of those things that if we look at over here, we have cash outside that exceeds the limits, and we could suffer losses as a result of that. So that you're probably going to see a risk factor for most companies as they go through. Second one over here, and I'm going to talk about the breakdown of this chief financial officer functions. We'll go through that momentarily. And the other part over here in the treasury function is how do we actually manage our cash? The next part over here is what institutions are the deposits kept? If I am a board member for a large publicly traded company, the first question I'm asking my CFO is I'm saying, hey, is our money at banks that undergo these stress tests, or is our money kept at banks with only 50 billion in assets, so they're subverting it? Not necessarily subverting it, but are they going through and doing those parts? What I would probably, if I was a bank that had less than 250 billion in assets, I would be going through and putting myself through these stress tests right now, because if I don't do it, a regulator is going to come in and do it for me. I'd rather go through and do this right now. So over here, where is our money being kept? And also, too, should this be disclosed by publicly traded companies? If we go back over here and look at this, Roku did say that they had a big portion of their money at Silicon Valley Bank. Would it be prudent, though, if it's that big of a percentage, for the companies to go through and say, hey, we've got 487 billion at Silicon Valley Bank. We have 500 billion at Chase, whatever it might be. And so that would probably give investors, until this whole thing blows over, much more calm. And again, if you're at a company where you're a director and you have money at a bank that has below 250 billion in assets, I would be I wouldn't want to say I'd be panicked, but you'd have to go through and look at what the bank is doing to make sure that your money is kept safe. But again, the Fed stepped in, and that original 8K that was filed by Roku on Friday, it's turning out not to be as bad. So we talked a little bit about corporate treasury, and this is really where short-term and long-term investments are being made. If I look at another company aside from Roku, which is really what I want to look like, is Apple. And Apple has a lot of money. Okay, so Apple's 10Q, if you look at this over here for the 3 months, actually not the 3 months, okay, right over here. As of December 31st, 2022, Roku had 30 billion in marketable securities, current, and 114 billion in non-current marketable securities, or though it's planning holding for more than a year. So as part of Apple, Apple does have a chief financial officer, but they have a chief financial officer who has below him or is supervising a treasury department, meaning that how are we going through and managing our funds? And the whole kind of lesson is over here. So the Roku CFO, it's one of the things, and again, I don't know who that person is, but as we are a CFO and as we grow, it's I've been a chief financial officer, albeit for smaller publicly traded companies, as well as some privately held companies. And when you're going through and working as the chief financial officer, there are a lot of different areas that you're going to be responsible for, including financial reporting, drafting over those 10Ks. It's not done by the auditors, it's done by management. I also have to do reporting to my board of directors so they can make the best possible decisions for the company, and also internally. Financial planning, right? Do I need to go through and constantly make 3 to 5 year plans to be going through and budgeting for myself? Absolutely. Financial analysis. Do I need to be looking internally at my operations to see what's happening within the company, comparing budgets to actual? Yes. Corporate treasury, where the short-term and long-term investments are being made. Again, I don't have any expertise in that. I would need to go through and hire people who do have that expertise. And then lastly, you have the controller function, which is really controlling the inflow and outflow of cash. If you're at a startup and you're the CFO, you're probably going to be doing everything or just a little bit about everything, which can be fine for a little bit. But as you start to grow, that's when things need to be delegated, right? So again, one of those things where this is a very unfortunate situation, but I do think that hopefully everything will be okay at the end of the day, at least for Roku, because I love their products. They're not paying me to endorse this or not paying me to make this video. Rather, I just wanted to make this video just so you could get a better understanding of where the cash is and the different disclosures that relate to that cash. So thank you for watching. Appreciate your liking and subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at 1812cpa@gmail.com. If you want to see other content, feel free to reach out to me. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a good day.